Hello and welcome to Fowl Plays, where we look at tales of tabletop tragedy that are sure to ruffle some feathers. I'm your host, BossGoose, and in today's story, we have a player who is invited to join a new group by their friend and promised a great D&D experience. Everything starts out well until the DM's wife makes her introduction, and things begin to spiral out of control as she receives special treatment, sexually assaults an NPC, and engages in several other that guy behaviors, leading to interparty conflict as the others struggle to move forward with the game. Before we get to today's story though, there is a situation brewing in the Goose Den and you're gonna need your D20 for this one. I just received news that there's an itsy bitsy drider that's trying to infiltrate the place and steal my special cookie recipe. Of course, we can't let this happen, so I need you to stand guard and make sure that nothing gets taken while I go get my goose radar and track down our culprit. It's going to take all your perceptive powers to spot our tiny intruder, so go ahead and roll your dice and I'll be right back in 3, 2, 1. And if you manage to roll a 13 or higher, then you managed to spot our little thief and we caught them before anything could be taken. Arrangements have been made to release them back into the wild, and I'll bake you a fresh tray of cookies as thanks. However, if you rolled under a 13, then unfortunately the recipe was snatched from right under our noses, and our tiny invader has absconded with all the cookies. They did, however, leave a subscribe button behind, and if you press it, you will receive updates whenever new content is available on my channel, and easy access to hours of existing content that will help fill that cookie-shaped void in your life. Now, without any further delays, it's time to take your seats and wet your beaks as we dive on into today's tale. The title is a little bit clickbait, I suppose, since both the DM and his wife are to blame. This campaign was several years back, so I feel enough time has passed to talk about it. 5e had just been released. If I recall, the Dungeon Master's Guide had not even been released yet. I was invited to a 5e drop-in, drop-out campaign on Roll20 by a friend of mine who had told me it was some of the best tabletop he had ever played. I signed up, got in contact with the DM, and rolled up a neutral good druid. And my friend was right. The first session was some of the most fun combat I have ever played to this day. There are approximately 15 to 20 people all playing this game, though only 5 or so play per session. Enter his wife. His wife played a lawful good Shifter Oath of Devotion Paladin in his campaign. At the time it was homebrewed as there was no real material to pull from in 5e, and played up the animal aspects to an unpleasant degree. The first session that I played that included her started off with her shifter meeting my druid, with her character urinating on mine as a greeting. According to everyone else in the call, this was the usual for her. Despite my misgivings, I was relatively new to D&D and that campaign, so I shook it off for a chance to play some D&D. The party's wizard prestidigitated the urine from my character, and we continued on. That was the start of a long string of similar repulsive actions taken by the player, with just about every session including some kind of disgusting or overly sexual action taken towards NPCs, the party, or both. In this post, however, I've chosen to highlight one specific session. That also happened to be my final one with the group. The session starts off with me, a bard, a rogue, a fighter, and the wife going on a quest to find some missing villagers that have been kidnapped from a trade caravan by a group of orcs. We tracked their whereabouts to a cave at the edge of a forest. As we went inside, we were immediately accosted by a group of orcs, whom our bard immediately cast Hypnotic Pattern on. Most of the party made quick work of each of the orcs as they were entranced. However, the wife decided to take a different approach. She described pulling down an orc's pants and jerking him off. Wow, okay, that went to 100 real fast. Each turn as it went by, she'd ask the DM, "Does he seem close?" To which the DM would nervously laugh and say something to the effect of, "Not yet, maybe you should try something else?" She didn't take the hint that it was making people uncomfortable, however. After 3 or so turns of this, the DM tells her that the orc has finished. Ugh. So, of course, she takes the opportunity to describe how she points the orc's member at our bard and describes in detail about how the orc finishes all over her. Oh my god. No. She then describes slitting the orc's throat and leaving him to die. Trust me, in retrospect, I really wish I had gotten up from the table at this or any of the other points that the wife did something like this. I can't believe she did something like this more than once, and that people are still at the table. After mopping up the rest of the orcs, we proceed further into the cave to find the missing townspeople. Inside, we found a large open cave with a large chasm. Described as being a nigh bottomless pit, a player shot an arrow with light cast on it into it, only for it to go so far down it couldn't be seen anymore. This is important later. One side was separated from the other, with only a slim bridge on the outside rim connecting the two halves. We stumble across a circle drawn in blood in the middle of a circle of bound villagers, all being guarded by a number of drow and driders. A quick knowledge arcana check let us know that this was likely a summoning circle to open a portal to bring demons into our plane, and so we set to work fighting the drow to rescue the villagers. At this point, I should probably mention that the DM allowed his wife to have a nightmare as the subject of her Find Steed spell, using the ambiguity of the "your DM might allow other animals to be summoned as steeds" clause to allow it. When someone pointed out that nightmares really only follow the orders of an evil character and that she was lawful good, the DM mentioned that it isn't truly a nightmare, it's just the spirit taking the form of a nightmare, with all the abilities of a nightmare included, such as the 90-foot fly speed, the massive hoof damage, the fire resistance, and the ability to shift into the ethereal plane anytime she wished. So the wife rides in on her nightmare and begins smiting just about anything she can get her hands on, which is just about everyone due to her 90-foot fly speed, and the drow open up the portal and begin summoning demons using the life force of the villagers. After I make my way close enough to see the portal, I made an arcana check to see if the portal can be closed using the dispel magic I had prepared, which the DM replied that I could. The wife, however, decided to take matters into her own hands and began slaughtering the civilians. In character, I called out to her that I could close the portal, I just needed to be close enough, to which she replied, "But this is faster." After a fairly long battle to get to the bridge, I was finally in range to dispel the portal, but the wife, to her credit, and the rogue managed to dispel it first by murdering half the civilians. After we finished off the final demon that had come through the portal, the rest of the driders and drow retreated into the chasm. At this point, the rest of us convene at the summoning circles to check on the rest of the civilians. They're alive, but not in very good shape, and they need transport back to town. Fortunately for us, however, the wife has an amazing plan to deal with the civilians. Leave no witnesses. Lawful good, ladies and gentlemen. Not only has this lawful good oath of devotion paladin murdered a bunch of innocent people to close a portal, they are now suggesting that we kill the rest of the civilians so that no one back in town learns that she killed a bunch of innocent civilians. The bard, fighter, and I all try to convince her to back down and stop, but she and the rogue are agreed on this course of action. After some pressure from the fighter, the rogue supposedly comes around to our side and attempts to give a villager a healing potion. Our fighter correctly identifies the potion as a poison, however, and prevents him from using it. Then, the wife moves to attack a civilian. With almost the entire party wanting to save the villagers, I make a decision. I send the DM a message. Can I cast Dispel Magic on her steed? Sure, but what's your intention? To make her fall in the chasm. At this point, she is floating over the bottomless pit. Her nightmare disappears. The DM gives her a dex save to jump off her nightmare and onto the top of the cliff before it disappears. DC 15, she fails. He gives her another dex saving throw to grab the edge of the cliff as she falls. DC 15, she fails. And so she falls to the bottom of the pit. Thankfully for her, however, the fall to the bottom of the chasm didn't deal enough damage to kill her. In fact, it didn't even deal enough damage to knock her out. She starts climbing out of the pit. But wait, says the bard, didn't you say the driders were down there? I did, says the DM. He rolls secretly for the drider's bow shot. It misses. It misses 2 more times. The drider decides that the wife isn't worth the effort and leaves. That's awfully convenient. During this time, the bard, fighter, and I start loading the unconscious villagers into the bard's wagon. The rogue decides to throw a rope down the pit and begins to descend to save the wife. The bard decides to cut the rope, sending the rogue tumbling down into the cavern, under the belief that he'd live thanks to the wife being down there to heal him. And with that, the three of us left to go back to town to recount the tale of what happened here. The wife had been quiet for quite some time, and after the DM announced the end of the session, she immediately left the call. We all thanked the DM for the session and left. 30 minutes or so after the session, however, a message comes through the group chat from the DM. He describes that, despite being in a deep chasm with no spells, the wife and the rogue managed to get back to town before the three of us and reported to the town guard, and informed them that I had attempted to murder them. Once we got back to town, my character was taken into custody and hanged for the attempted murder of an esteemed adventurer. Just like that, out of game, my character was dead. I messaged the DM asking if that meant he was kicking me out of his game, though he assured me he wasn't. His wife was just upset about my character trying to kill her character, and since I tried to kill someone on my own side, the town decided to put me to death. He further explained that he runs the game for his wife, and not for anyone else, so if she's not having fun, he doesn't want to run it. The game will be tailored to her. That's fair enough, I suppose, but I don't enjoy a game where a player is explicitly the main character around whom reality bends. Neither did most of the other players in the campaign, who, after hearing him put his priorities in explicit terms, also left the game. TLDR. Wife's lawful good paladin engages in multiple sex crimes and the murder of innocent civilians to clean up any witnesses, only for my character to pay the price out of game between sessions for trying to stop her reign of terror. Edit. I messed up some of the formatting somehow. Why is it that so many lawful good paladins turn out to be Murderhobo psychopaths? If this is how DM's wife behaved in a single session, I can only imagine the kind of stuff she pulled throughout the rest of the campaign. I mean, right off the bat, the whole urination thing was just weird. Like, who's that for? It's not particularly funny, and it's a really awkward way to introduce yourself to a new PC, let alone a new player themselves. Now, if this was the only thing and she was just into RPing the animal side of the character, then maybe not such a big deal, and I don't think I've ever heard of an animal that does this kind of thing as a greeting, so it's just way out there for me. Moving on though to what I think is the most egregious thing in this story is the graphic description of violating that orc. I assume she thought it was hilarious and that's why she did it, but it didn't seem like anyone else, including the DM, was comfortable with the situation. If you have any social sense at all, then you should know that this is not something that you do in front of a group of people, let alone ones that you barely know. From what OP said, it sounds like there were more incidents in this in previous games, and if your game is going to include this kind of content, then you really need to put up some kind of warning for people who are joining. That wasn't enough for the wife though. No, she went on to describe the bard getting sprayed, which is completely tone deaf, and if I was that player, or any other player for that matter, I would have packed up and left then and there. Now, it was made clear at the end, but apparently the others in the group didn't realize how heavily the DM was actually favoring his wife. If you and your partner want to RP an adventure together in which they are the main character, then you should consider making it just the two of you, because there's really few things that are more disheartening to a player than hearing that their character is secondary and doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of the story. Between the nightmare steed, the not losing her oath for murdering innocents, and having OP's character hanged because they tried to stop her, it sounds like the wife could have gotten away with pretty much anything, so it's no wonder that most of the party decided to go their separate ways after the incident. Here's hoping that in the future, if the DM decides to run another game, they either treat everyone equally, or at the very least put a disclaimer up letting everyone know exactly what they're signing up for. Anyways, thanks for checking out my video and sticking around till the end. Hopefully you found it entertaining. I upload new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, so make sure you check out my channel for more D&D stories. Also, thanks to all of you, we now have a community tab on the channel, so check that out when you get a chance to ask me questions, leave me feedback, and answer any polls that I'm sure to put up in the future. Together, we'll make the Goose Gang even bigger and stronger. But if you like this video, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a goosebump in the comments below. Your feedback and support is greatly appreciated. But until next time, be good players.